Hey, friends, good to have you here. I'm with Kendra and Daniela, and today we're talking about the momentum principle. Um, let's get right into it. Here it is. It's in the very act of moving towards their goals that the community begins to uncover the critical ingredients in the change process. Leaders are mobilized, ideas are tested, roles are established, and social capital is created through the building of trust and reciprocity. So, friends, the key word here is moving. Momentum principle is all about taking steps and moving forward, not thinking first, not strategizing first, not raising funds, not waiting for help, not holding a meeting, but moving. It's not that any of those things are bad, but the power of the momentum principle is to recognize what happens when we take that first small and courageous step. There's so many things in our lives that can prevent us from moving towards our goal. It could be that we just say, oh, I'm just not prepared, or I'm not educated. If I have a few more courses under my belt first, I don't have anyone to help me. If I had a few other people around me, or it could be just that I'm afraid it's too risky to move forward towards the vision. I can remember as a kid, one of the most frightening things for me was learning to ride a bike. And it's something now, I just do naturally. But the interesting thing about riding a bike is really there's only one way to learn it, and that is just to hop on the bike and go. And I wouldn't do it. I was afraid. I remember it was a big hurdle to jump over. It was a big risk. And so eventually, what my father did was when I got on the bike, he just gave me a push and I had no choice. And the thing with riding a bike is you actually can't learn how to do it unless you're moving. So think about that. You can't steer a bike that's not moving. You can't learn how to balance unless you're moving. And you can't even use the brakes unless you're actually moving. And in the Christian Bible, we see that Jesus really understood the importance of this principle. He probably never used the term momentum principle, but what he did often say to people was, follow me. Very simple. Follow me. And I did a quick study, and it appears 22 different times just in the four books of the Gospels where Jesus says, follow me. I'll share one quick example you see there from the book of Luke. After this, Jesus went out and he saw a tax collector named Levi, and he was sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, follow me. I mean, what a thing to say. What a radical request. Levi must have had so many questions. Where are we going? What's the plan? Give me a picture of what the plan is first. What do I need to take with me? Do we have enough money for this? There's a lot of risk involved. But my guess is that Jesus sees all of those questions as obstacles for Levi. He knows that what Levi really needs is to get on the bike and maybe even have Jesus give him that push. Well, earlier we talked about the wonder principle, and there's an interesting connection between this wonder principle and now talking about momentum. And wonder is all about creating space for that big idea to form, to create excitement and motivation about what lies ahead. And so you've got this big idea, but the problem is that a dream that's so big can also be daunting. It can almost be like a mountain that's a little bit too big to climb, and it keeps us motionless, just standing still, waiting for some more preparation to come into place. If we had a few more resources, I need some ropes and an axe if I'm going to get to the top of this mountain. And so wonder and momentum, they need to work together in harmony. One way to think about it is in the slide here, vision is really powerless if you don't have movement, momentum. But movement is futile. It's useless without a vision. And so here you can see that the importance of these two things tied together. So friends, we need to start with a small step. And so I want to invite you now just to be thinking about what does that look like for you in your situation? Earlier, we shared a story about a group in Kinshasa led by Jocelyn is his name, and they're called Unijack. And these young students had a huge vision to change their neighborhood, but of course, no resources or experience to accomplish that vision. So they decided to take a first step. And if you remember, that first step was simply to go into the streets and begin to pick up garbage. So they weren't changing the world really with their first step. But they didn't start with planning a large strategy. They didn't start by trying to mobilize many, many volunteers. They didn't start by trying to raise money. But I can tell you now, looking back, that all of those things came together as they moved forward. And that's why we have this beautiful expression, mantra. The path was made by walking. So by moving forward, they made a path. And so it's only in looking back that we can see the path where our feet have carved into the earth. And so this is the primary aspect of the momentum principle, is getting past that wall of risk, of fear, of planning, and those things that hinder us from motion and taking that first step. So I'll turn it over to Daniela, and she's going to talk about kind of a second aspect of this momentum principle.
Right. Jamie said that the first part is that initial push, that initial getting yourself moving. But the second part is this idea of maintaining momentum. So what does it mean to keep momentum? Have you ever noticed that once you've gotten through the initial start of a running race, or maybe the first few pedals of a bike ride, you start to get into a rhythm of motion. You get through that beginning hard work and you start to, what we say is, hit your stride. It becomes easier. How does that happen? Well, it's momentum. It's the power once something starts moving, and it's the strength or force that allows something to continue and even grow stronger or faster as time goes on. I love this French proverb. I'm just going to pull up here. Petit à petit, le oiseau fait son nid. Little by little, the bird makes its nest. In a community, momentum tends to build little victory after little victory. It doesn't have to be impressive, great projects. It's continuous small efforts, one after the other, kind of like pedaling a bike, that creates something that we call the domino effect. A domino effect, as you can see in this video here, is the growing outcome when one domino gets tipped and then the rest start to go on. And it's a series of events that form a chain reaction. I want to share a little story that reminds me of this domino effect. And it's about our friend Jaya, who lives in Nepal. Jaya was raised in a community that would be considered impoverished. And it was difficult for children in his community to receive an education. But Jaya had the energy and determination and earned himself a certificate to become a hospital emergency technician. And he slowly earned high respect in the hospital where he worked. In his work, he was so often treating victims of car accidents that a burden started to grow in his heart. People were continually being brought into the hospital too late, and if only they could be offered care at the scene of the accident rather than way later when there was not really any hope anymore. More lives would be saved this way. But in Nepal, there wasn't really a budget or support to help people on rural countryside roads. So if something was going to change, he felt like he would have to be the one to do it. And a seed of faith grew in his heart and mind. The first step that he took was to simply just walk into a village along the highway and offer first aid training to people. This was the start. And then he went village to village and step by step, training by training, kind of like little by little, his movement began. People were excited and wanted to join in the work. And he was being invited all over the place. Supplies began coming in, and the community themselves were the ones providing it. And now he has a well-respected organization with several employees that have been empowered to help with the work, a couple of vehicles even, and a huge wait list for training sessions. This is momentum. Have you ever seen a running race with hurdles? I'm going to show you what that looks like. Here you see them going, ready and go. They run over the hurdles just like that. I stood in front of a hurdle like this before, and I've wondered, how do these racers so easily jump over them one after the other? They're actually quite high. It's quite amazing. And I realized that it was through training. It takes a lot of training for a hurdler to learn to use some built up momentums to successfully carry them over the hurdle. Sometimes something that you as a community group are trying to do or want to do seems like this massive hurdle. And it's impossible to get over. Or maybe that hurdle is people not agreeing with you or opposing what you're doing. So how do you get over this hurdle or barrier? It's the power of motion. Just as a hurdler builds her momentum before she needs to jump, so does a community build their momentum, little action after little action. When you take step after step and build momentum, you're activating change. But what does that look like in a community? Let's look back at Jaya's story. Jaya gained the respect from the people around him, respect in the hospital and with the communities he came into contact with. Secondly, people were inspired to get involved, and Rescue Network Nepal was formed. The doors started to open for people to fit into roles and exercise their gifts. Leaders rose up. People with finance giftings were helping with incoming funds for the purchasing of equipment and vehicles. And more people with medical experience became involved. Next, they find out what is needed and assets are mobilized. So in Jaya's case, space was needed to meet and to do trainings. So communities themselves would have to find a local school or a local church to meet. So what was needed was in turn, once they needed something, then the assets that were required were found. And no matter what situation or hurdle arose, Jaya and his team became creative and activated the skills necessary in order to face the next step. So what happened? Trust and interdependency between team members happened. Communities were built because the whole process required generosity and hospitality. And lastly, ideas are tested, adapted, and today they are a national organization, highly respected and effective in the work they're doing. Not only are they training first responders, but they're also doing relief work. They're putting on health camps, and they're training communities to work from the inside out. So I'm going to hand it over to Kendra to talk a little bit. How do you put this actual principle into practice?
Thank you so much, Daniela. I love that story. It's inspiring and it illustrates this principle so perfectly. So I'm going to just dive into this a little more practically. And many of the things that I name are in Jaya's story that we just heard. So how does the momentum principle work in practice? How do we take action with that first small step and then maintain momentum as a team? Specifically for our context here, I want to focus on leadership for you as community-centered development leaders and teams who are leading your community in this process. So how do we lead while in motion? I want to share a concept with you called adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership is an approach to leadership that embraces change, challenges traditional approaches to problem solving in favor of experimentation and innovation. The adaptive leader does just that. They adapt. They make adjustments as the path unfolds. The adaptive leader is able to respond to an evolving landscape, keeping the team on course toward their goals, and able to make adjustments along the way. So I'm going to break that down a little bit into some practical keys for a team in motion. So the first practical key for a team in motion is course correction, that idea of making adjustments as we go. Like Jamie brought up the metaphor of riding a bike, I'm going to touch on that a little bit. Like riding a bike, making turns, accelerating, decelerating, coming to a stop, all of those things cannot happen until you start to actually ride the bike and the bike is in motion. It's only when the bike is in motion that you can start to guide the movement of the bike. So in the same way, in our community-centered development process, we have to be making course corrections as we go. When you're operating in the momentum principle, it's so important to always be asking the question, where are we going, in order to evaluate our momentum and assessing, are we on target? We have to make the needed adjustments to stay in movement toward our community development goals. And this requires agility. Agility is simply the ability to move quickly, decide quickly, and stay in motion. And when we take steps forward, we recognize this is just a piece, and we all know this is true, that sometimes we have failures or we make mistakes, and that affects our corrections that we make on course. Sometimes in this process, we do make mistakes, and the adaptive leader understands that success will come as we learn from our mistakes and failures. When we take action, an effect occurs and we receive feedback, we learn and we make adjustments, making sure we're staying on path. And there's always greater potential when we learn and adjust as we go. The next key to success for a team in motion is staying on target. As a leader and as a team, it's so important that you know where you're going, right? The goals that you're working toward as a team and as a community are agreed upon by all. The adaptive leader and team understands that the end goals ensure that the community is still on track toward the goal. For example, you might take some detours, your route might change, but the destination and the general direction stays the same. So that is your role as the team and as the leader, to make sure that you're on track for your goals as a community. The next key to success for a team in motion is awareness, the skill of observation. In order to know how to make the course corrections, we have to stay attentive to our community, the progress of a project, and the team in order to evaluate what's needed from moment to moment. As one of our friends who's on this course, Peak, a leader from Laos, says, we as leaders, we can only be effective if we're observing and aware and attentive to our team and to our community and listening well so that we can make the right course corrections. Mm-hmm. The next key to success is innovation and experimentation. And the movement of the momentum principle, it always includes innovation and experimentation. Innovation, it's kind of a big word. If you haven't heard it before, it's simply the process of bringing about new ideas, methods, or solutions that have a significant positive impact. It's simply finding new ways of doing things. Innovation requires creativity, it requires courage, it requires risk-taking and movement forward always. If we're committed to taking action and moving forward, we have to also give ourselves permission to make mistakes and fail, like I mentioned in the first key to success, with the commitment to learn from those failures and make discoveries together as a team. I want to share a quote from a book called Creative Confidence. It's really good. Just a note on this idea of making mistakes as a team and adapting as we go. Fear of failure holds us back from learning all sorts of new skills, from taking on risks, from tackling new challenges. Forward momentum asks that we overcome that fear. You know you are going to drop the ball and make mistakes and go in a wrong direction a time or two. But you come to accept that that is part of learning. And in doing so, you're able to remain confident that you are moving forward despite the setbacks. And lastly, the last key to success is, of course, trust. Trusting God, trusting the process, and trusting your team. So trusting God, right? We believe God is good, right? He has good plans for restoring the world and transforming all things for the better. And we are invited as leaders and community-centered development practitioners to participate with making the world a better place. There's a verse that I love from Jeremiah, for God knows the plans that he has for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. So for me and for us, trusting God is key as we take risks and move forward in this beautiful work. The next piece is trusting the process. This process that we're talking about, the community-centered development process, has been developed by practitioners around the world who have been learning, sharing, and bringing best practices to the table to help build this process. It's all about community flourishing, and it's really effective. We obviously believe in it so much, and we think it's worth trusting. And finally, trusting one another. You guys are on here with your teams. You're on here with like-minded, resonant-hearted friends who want to see the world be a better place, who want to see your community flourish. So trusting one another is key. You guys are in this together, and you are going to make mistakes together. You're going to make discoveries together, and you are going to encourage each other to continue to move forward. So trusting one another is key. I'm going to pass it over to Jamie, who's going to land this plane for us. Jamie?
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, so hopefully you're thinking about your own pathway. How does this momentum principle apply to you? And I want to close by reminding you that development from the inside out, right, starting from the center of the community, this is not the typical pathway to change. This is not the well-worn path that's easy to navigate. Many travelers have gone before. So in order for you to walk your own path, you might need to ignore or even reject traditional pathways. So we're inviting you into a more radical and different approach to doing it. A very quick story about Dr. Delphin, and maybe some of you have met him. He's a part of our network. You can see him in front of this large health clinic. He manages this clinic in a slum in Kinshasa. And this was actually his vision as a poor young medical student. But how did he get there? And I want to just talk about two different pathways. The traditional or typical pathway was for him to graduate, find a job in the field of health or medicine, work hard, earn money, and then maybe down the road be hired in a clinic like this, maybe even join a charity, write proposals and look for grants. Eventually, when he had the resources, perhaps he could come back to this Camp Luca, this area that his heart longs to serve, and he could manage the clinic there. But Delphin chose a different path. He made his path by walking it. Here you can see the slum, the small village in Kinshasa called Camp Luca. Delphin's first step was just to go here to this place that he loved and he wanted to serve, and he began to visit with people, learn about them, find out what they were thinking, what are they needing. Eventually, he bought a small microscope, and he found a little corner in a room that belonged to someone else, and he began to diagnose people and really began to practice medicine in the smallest way that he could do it. And he's building trust with people. Soon he was able to rent a small location, and you can see it here in the next slide. Very small building. It had 3 or 4 rooms in it, and he could see patients and treat them. And through all of this, he was inspiring people to help him, people in the community, building trust with folks, but also the involvement of local government who saw what he was doing. And so his work was beginning to bridge into other opportunities and resources, and eventually even with outside funders who got involved in what he was doing. And so I won't tell you the whole story of how that all came to be, but only that that pathway brought him to his vision, and in a way that was much more, I think, impactful, bringing people, the whole community, into this sense of mutual ownership, and the whole community is really involved in what's going on there. So what's the first step in your pathway? Sometimes we talk about low-hanging fruit. What's right in front of you? For Delphin, it was to visit the people of Camp Luca. For Unijack, it was to go and pick up garbage in the neighborhood. So what does that look like for you? For example, if your vision is around peacemaking, perhaps it involves dealing with conflict right in front of you, maybe even in your own family. If you want to start a agricultural cooperative, maybe you need to visit farmers, ask questions, share seeds with them. Where does your pathway begin? We want to start by facing in the direction of our vision and simply walking forward. So we've thrown a lot of different ideas and metaphors at you. So we look forward to talking together and learning from each other, just sharing these ideas and going deeper together. So thank you.